Congratulations! You made the varsity, the podcast. My name is John Aranda, and I am Puck's sports correspondent and the host of this pod. And today, my old friend Andrew Marchand joins the pod. You all know Andrew is a great sports media reporter for The Athletic, which is a position that he held for a long time at the New York Post, too. And we're going to hash out a bunch of sports media topics, from baseball's new media rights deals to Netflix's sports ambitions. I think most of you know that Marchand and I hosted a podcast together a couple of years ago, and he now hosts his own twice-weekly sports media podcast at andrewmarchand.com. So make sure you give that a listen. It's great to have him back on here. But before we get to Andrew, today is Wednesday, November 26th, the day before Thanksgiving, and here's what I'm watching. It's actually all about Thanksgiving, or more specifically, about the NFL games on offer this Thanksgiving. Packers-Lions, Chiefs-Cowboys. These are glamour games that the NFL has put into their most visible regular season window. And what I find interesting is that it represents something of a change for how the league and the networks approach this holiday. There used to be a debate about how to schedule these games. One school of thought was that it doesn't matter who played these games. There's a built-in audience that guarantees a huge viewership number no matter what. Lions in the early game, Cowboys in the late game. Who cares who they play? Save the good matchups for other dates on the regular season calendar. But there was another school of thought that wanted the best matchups. True, any game would get a big number. But what about a great game? That would approach NFC and AFC championship level viewing. And the NFL has experimented with both. When Washington wasn't good, it was a regular Thanksgiving opponent for the Cowboys. In fact, Washington has played Dallas 4 times on Thanksgiving since 2016. But the one year that the NFL scheduled the Giants, representing the biggest media market in the United States, well, that's the game that set the viewership record for regular season NFL games. 41.2 million viewers in 2022. With these matchups this year, it appears that the league wants to put its best games in its biggest window. All of which points to the reason why everyone I know is predicting a record-setting number for the Cowboys and the Chiefs. It's a big game, it's marquee franchises, but it's also going to benefit from the changes that Nielsen made this year and how it counts viewers. Changes that benefit sports leagues and networks. Not to get too in the weeds, but Nielsen now counts more out-of-home viewers. And it incorporates big data. And what you need to know is that those are 2 reasons why you see so many ratings increases across all of sports this year. So we've established now, Chiefs-Cowboys on CBS will set a record. But here's my real prediction. The Packers-Lions on Fox, that's going to wind up as the second most watched game in the NFL's regular season history. And for the same reasons, 2 popular teams playing under the new Nielsen rules. Add in the fact that Fox is going to carry the game on Tubi, and that should result in a monster number. Tubi is the name of Fox's streaming service, and in February, it added 13.6 million viewers to Fox's Super Bowl audience. But really, all I'm hoping for is just some competitive games. Okay, now let's get to Andrew Marchand. Andrew Marchand, thank you for joining the varsity. I know you heard my essay at the beginning where I'm talking about Thanksgiving football and all of the ratings predictions. I generally hate talking about ratings, but if it's going to set a record, I brought it up. As you're looking at Thanksgiving and the NFL, what are some of the things that are standing out at you?
Well, I think it was really deliberate what they did. They make a huge deal about putting the schedule together, and it's at the time of year in the spring where people are very hungry for the NFL. But when you saw the full schedule, I try not to overreact to the schedule. This network did well, this network didn't do well. But the one thing that you could circle was if the Cowboys, if the Chiefs were at least 500 or above, you might be looking at a record. You have Patrick Mahomes, who's the biggest draw in the NFL in terms of an individual. And he might have been, I think if you look at the last 20 years in terms of individuals, which isn't as big a deal in the NFL because the teams carry so much weight. But he's the guy that people want to watch. And then the Cowboys, they're number one in terms of people tuning in to watch the Cowboys. So you put those two together, 4:30 game. You think you're going to get some records, and they lucked out a little bit. Chiefs come back, beat the Colts the other day. Cowboys, incredible comeback against the Eagles on Fox, a 4:30 game. So they got some nice momentum. So the game means something. Both teams lose. I think it does hurt the rating a little bit. Not as much interest now. The Cowboys look like they could be a playoff team. The Chiefs, they're just kind of stalking there in terms of they right now, are just on the cusp of the playoffs. And but if they get in, you kind of feel like they might make another run to the Super Bowl. And so I think you could see what the NFL was trying to accomplish, and I think that they will accomplish their goal.
I mean, you've written about this a lot in terms of there have been some weeks where the NFL is so spread out. We have an international game, so they have a new game that they pulled out on Sunday afternoon that's now in a Sunday morning window. Thursday night, Monday night, Sunday night. Sometimes you have games on Saturdays later on, and you end up with some weeks, some weekends where the games really aren't that great. I mean, does it make sense to you? It still makes some sense to me to say, okay, let's take the Cowboys and the Chiefs and let's anchor it on one of those weeks. And then you can put the Cowboys versus the Jaguars, or what's the team, the Titans? What's the team that brings the fewest amount of viewers in? And you're guaranteed more than like 30 million viewers, which is a great number. I mean, I can understand wanting to use Thanksgiving in that way as well.
Yeah, the NFL is the most popular sport by far. You look at the top 100 Nielsen numbers at the end of any year, and I think last year was 72 of the top 100 highest rated games or events of anything, sports, entertainment, were NFL games led by the Super Bowl at 115, 120 million people. So it's number one. And there are a couple of reasons. Number one is it's 3 hours. Basically, a lot of people have a favorite team, they have a fantasy team, they bet easy to digest. But the other big advantage for the NFL is scarcity. Even though they've extended the season now to 17 weeks, and you have buys, so it goes a little bit longer, it's still scarcity wins the day. I've said this a million times for baseball. If the Yankees played 17 games per year, the ratings would be incredible. Now, would they be the same as the NFL? Probably not, but the numbers would be even higher. So that's what the NFL has going for it. I do think, and the numbers haven't borne this out. They've done well in those Sunday morning windows, but I do think they have to be a little bit cognizant of spreading it too thin because someone like me, I have Sunday Ticket where you can get all the out of market games, which you need because where I live, you get the Jets and the Giants on your local TV. You don't want to watch those two teams every week if you could avoid it. But you start looking at the schedule as you get down here midway past, more than midway through the season. And you have some dog games where there's two, teams with 2 or 3 wins, and nobody wants to watch that. So I think they have to be careful to protect scarcity. So there are events, but and how they divvy it up, I don't know. I think part of it is it's unpredictable. I think a lot of people going to the season thought Monday night had a poor schedule, and it's not going to be amazing, but it's better than what it was thought to be. And so I think there's a lot of unpredictability with the NFL.
I will say that Thanksgiving week, where you have 3 games on Thanksgiving, you have Black Friday, they pull out another game there. Sunday night football, Monday night football. I mean, you're not going to use the Sunday Ticket this weekend on Sunday a ton, I would think. The Black Friday game, I get so focused in viewership and seeing if it works in terms of viewership. But I think regardless of how many viewers actually watch that game on Black Friday, which is carried by Amazon Prime, Amazon seems to be legitimately thrilled with it. And I think it's more than just spin on their part. It just gets people into Prime, and then they use other aspects of Prime and makes people a little bit stickier. How do you view Black Friday?
I think if you look at all the big digital players, Amazon Prime Video has definitely done the best job. They have the clearest plan. And I think if you look at what they've done on Friday, they are going to own Black Friday in terms of sports. They have the Skins game golf event in the morning. Then at 3 o'clock they have the NFL with an excellent matchup between the Bears and the Eagles, and then at night they have an NBA doubleheader. And what's their goal? There's a couple of things. I mean, number one, they always talk about they want to make it so it's a Prime membership. That you just get it. It's not even a thought when you get that $150 price tag at the beginning of the year whenever your yearly subscription comes up. So they want that. Number two is on Black Friday. That's obviously a huge day for them going into the holidays. And so, they want people on that, being reminded how you can buy things and seeing all the deals you could get. And so they'll have people looking at that all day, and they want to change habits, which they've done, as well as any digital company in terms of, there used to be where people would line out outside the door. And I think they still do for department stores trying to get, the toy of the year, whatever it is. But now a lot of people just shop online, let Amazon Prime just deliver their stuff to their door. And so you could see the strategy. I mean, is it worth $1 billion a year for the NFL, and now more than that per year from the NBA? I mean, that's a lot of money, but they're a global company, and so you could just see. I will just say this: it's hard for us. I think you and I try to get as in depth as we can, and I think I'll speak for you. You do a great job of getting as in depth as possible. We don't know the exact numbers, like this brings in this, and is that tangible that this is definitely leading to this many sales. We don't know that, but in terms of a clear strategy, I think Amazon Prime, and you look at what they're doing on Friday, is just it's obvious. I mean, and it seems to work.
You know what I find wild about Amazon and their entry into the NFL is just their relationship with the NFL. I find to be totally unique. And I go back to, 20 years ago when it was plainly obvious that ESPN had what the NFL considered the cable package. And as a result, they had, I called them the Jacksonville Jaguars network,
Yep.
because they would get the worst games consistently. And you could tell, I'm with you when you said earlier in this pod about when the schedule comes out. I try not to pay that much attention to it because, like, who knows who's going to be good or who's going to be bad at the end of the season. But you could tell that ESPN back in the 2006, 7, 8 era, even into the early teens, had a terrible schedule. And you turn it around to what is the streaming package, which it seems to be what the cable package was back then, but the amount of premier games and interdivision games that Amazon Prime carries is phenomenal. So when you see some of these numbers coming out, if I'm one of the legacy broadcast networks, I think I'm getting a little jealous of Amazon, because they and it bears out too through the season, like because well they are able to take some of the games off Thursday if it's a dog. I think they've done that once or twice, but it's generally, I think, rivals a Sunday night football schedule that Amazon has.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you my Brian Windhorst. Let me see if I get these on the screen. My Brian Windhorst fingers, the famous GIF from the ESPN NBA Insider. Was a couple years ago. He's talking about the Utah Jazz, and he kind of gave the whole reasons about a trade. So why does why does the NFL do that? I think it's pretty obvious. They want the streamers to be successful. They want Amazon Prime Video to be successful. They had a game, second game of the year was YouTube, just YouTube in Brazil with the Chiefs playing in that one, and the Chargers. And so they want YouTube to be successful. They want Christmas Day with Netflix to be successful. Why? Because those companies are worth trillions of dollars. The companies that, now Paramount, I'm not sure what they're worth with their new ownership, but the other ones are worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're not going anywhere. I don't think we've talked about this before. I don't think the NFL is just going to shift their model when they opt out of their agreements, or at least threaten to opt out at the end of the decade. But they want these digital players to love the NFL, to get addicted to the NFL. And so how do you do that? Well, you don't do it with, lame games. You give them some of the best matchups you can. And so they want Amazon Prime Video to be successful, make Thursday night, which is something that I think Roger Goodell has been, behind since the start, to be really successful. And back in the day, the last network to have it was Fox. And part of what their strategy was is they were taking some of their better games on Sunday and moving them to Thursday, which made some sense because they had both packages. But with Amazon Prime Video, they don't have that. They don't need to do that. And now they want them to be successful. And you look at where they're going, they make already, they have 11-year deals for more than $110 billion. That's with a B, everyone listening, B for Boston, for our Nesson people. And they're going to get much more than that. Will they double it? I don't know if they'll double it, but it's going to be a feeding frenzy, in my opinion, when those deals open up at the end of the decade. Because I think it's clear that Netflix wants in. YouTube has shown interest, and they could just take over the world if they want to. And then Amazon Prime has a full slate of games, and then you have TNT Sports, which you will see where their new ownership lands if that happens. And so they're players. And then you have the traditionals from ESPN to NBC, CBS, and Fox. And so that's a lot of bidders, and there's not going to be probably enough packages for everybody. I think they'll do things a little bit differently, but you also don't want to have too many partners because that can cause issues as well.
Yeah. All right. So a couple quick hitters before you go to break. The NFL they're going to open up their media deals either next year or more likely the year after. If we're going to see one new media company enter into the NFL, who's it going to be?
Well, I mean, it depends. You count anybody. If YouTube, are they
This
new?
is a prediction part of the podcast, Andrew.
Well, you said new. So new, John, would mean that someone who doesn't have the NFL now.
Well, I would consider
You're six.
YouTube to be new, and I would
Okay,
consider that
exactly.
Netflix to be new. Yeah, yeah.
So for people who are not familiar with John, this is what he does. He gives you a question. He kind of finagles it and then gets on you because you don't answer it. I mean, what do you want me to say? What was it? Quibi? What was that one that was a quick? What do you want me to say? Quibi or somebody like one
Oh,
some?
that would be great. I would clip that, and it would be all over social. Please say that.
So yeah, if you want me to predict, that's tough. I think. Look, I think I'd probably go YouTube gets in over Netflix. Reason again, I'm you asked me predictions, so I'm just being nice. I don't like making predictions about things I'm gonna report on unless I really feel strongly on it. I would say that it could go either way. The one thing I would say YouTube has an advantage over Netflix is that if they put it in front of their YouTube TV paywall, so it's just on YouTube and it's free. I think that's advantageous for the NFL because then it just gets if the government wants to get involved and say you're putting too much stuff on streamers, with Ted Cruz has talked about, in recent months, that gets around that. So if I have to pick between one or the other, I'd probably say YouTube has a little bit of advantage over Netflix. But it went to Netflix, I wouldn't be shocked at all. But to answer your question, I think the interesting thing for people listening, Apple TV is one that I'd really be surprised by. I think they have a lot of good shows. The technology is great, but I just don't see how the NFL would go with Apple TV in a deal unless things change by the end of the decade. Just they don't have the subscriber base as compared to Netflix or YouTube.
Congratulations. That's a correct answer. YouTube is a correct answer on that one. One more quick one. NBC, CBS, Fox, ABC, any one of them on the outside looking in after the NFL opens its rights deals?
It's possible. I doubt it. I think that they all maintain. I think you look at the market cap. Fox probably has the least amount of money, but they're built all around the NFL. I think the owners love Fox. They've done a great job since Rupert Murdoch came out of nowhere in the early '90s to get it. So I think I would think they all keep it in some form. Now, is it lessened? I mean, something I've again, this is my speculation, but I think it's informed and makes sense. Could the conference championships be on a more rotating basis where other players have it? It's not just CBS and Fox, just like the Super Bowl is now on a rotating basis. I think that's a way to satisfy a lot of different entities, get the most money. That's something I could see. Could the playoffs be slightly different? Maybe even you can even go a step further and earlier rounds, and they change because I think the NFL is probably pretty confident people will find it. So I think some of those historical ways you've witnessed the biggest moments might change, but I Again, the other thing I will say though, I don't think the new streamers are going to be that interested in the full package of games on a Sunday. I think they're going to want the event games. They want, one a week. So could someone come in and snatch Sunday Night Football from NBC Peacock? I think that's possible. And then could NBC and Peacock turn around and say, we're going to go after CBS or Fox's package? I do think that could be something where you could have maybe one of the broadcast heavyweights get knocked out. But I don't think it's, CBS getting caught surprised in the early 90s, or when NBC lost it back to CBS in the late 90s. I don't think anybody's going to be caught by surprise with some kind of blitz on the outside. I think everyone's very aware how much they need the NFL.
Final question before we go to break. Cowboys, Chiefs, Thanksgiving, over under 50 million viewers.
I'll go over. I go
Oh, okay.
50.5. Well, it's just more fun. I really have no
Yeah.
idea. 50.5 million. I think that's the number that's around. Um, I think over is a little more fun. I think your point at the beginning that kind of gets lost in the world. In our little world, we're very cognizant of the ratings all being higher. So you get that, 3 to 5% boost because of how Nielsen has changed how they do the ratings. And then you add in the fact that you have this matchup. Can I see 46 million? Yeah, I could see that as well. But I'll go 50.5. What do you got?
48.2 is the correct answer. 48.2.
Okay.
All right,
All
we're going to
right.
take a
Flip it.
break. We're going to come back and we're going to hit on ESPN's MLB deal. Actually, not just ESPN, but Netflix and NBC as well. Andrew, you and I have gone to town for the past couple of months writing about MLB's media deals. They just, ESPN earlier this year exercised an out where it got out of Sunday Night Baseball, got out of the first round, the wild card playoff round, and the home run derby as well. And MLB has spent the better part of the year negotiating with different entities to try to sell that off, and ended up just a couple of weeks ago selling, Sunday Night Baseball to NBC, selling the home run derby to Netflix. NBC also is getting the wild card playoff round, but they also, a unique part of the deal is that ESPN is going to have a Wednesday night game, and they're going to be able to control MLB.TV and the local rights of I think it's 6 teams that they have there. And in my private email, the varsity, I said that Jimmy Pitaro, for my money, emerged from this as the clear winner. It looked like he was totally out of the MLB back in February and March, and he comes back with what I think is a really good deal for the same amount of money as he was paying for MLB rights. As you look at this, who do you think is the really big winner to come out of these deals?
Yeah, I'd probably say ESPN did do better. I probably would agree with you because, the strategy with their direct to consumer product, which they're selling kind of like Nesson does, in terms of you can get it without having a cable subscription that they just rolled out this year. You want to get people there. And so having the rights to out of market games, in theory, should help that product, and also will allow them to get some information as the negotiations will heat up again in a couple of years because all these contracts are just for 3 years. So I think they did well. Um, Look, I've been critical of baseball because if they didn't opt out, they'd have much more money. I think if you look at what they sold, what ESPN had, ESPN opted out in February of Sunday Night Baseball, the first round of the playoffs, and Home Run Derby. They're going to pay $1.65 billion over the next 3 years. You add up what Netflix and NBC/Peacock are going to pay, it's going to be around 750 million. So you do the difference. That's around $900 million difference. That said, I will say MLB did a good job of the partners they ended up with. And in theory, they put some ducks on the pond going into the next negotiations because the next negotiations will have Fox's contract up. which includes the World Series and a good bulk of the playoffs. TNT Sports' contract will be up, which includes one LCS and a lot of the playoffs as well. So you want NBC and Peacock, in theory, to be very interested. You want Netflix to be very interested. We talked earlier about YouTube and the NFL. Could YouTube jump in? Amazon Prime Video, could they jump in? So I think when you look at the where MLB can be in a few years, they should have a lot of bidders who, in theory, if they have any money left over from the NFL deals, will have big interest, especially in the World Series. I think the one thing that I think on the horizon possibly is that there's not just one entity doing the World Series and broadcasting or streaming it, as we've had for more than a quarter century with Fox. I think the idea of that, because that's the biggest thing that MLB can sell. So I think they did pretty well finding these new partners. Roku's out of the equation. I always thought that was a mistake. I think these deals are a little bit better. The Netflix one, it's fine. I mean, they paid $50 million for 3 games. I don't know if Field of Dreams, featuring the Twins and the Phillies this year, is going to do that great. I'm not sure about opening day, home run derby. I just don't know. You don't. The one thing you want to be careful of is that you get Netflix involved, and then you give them events that aren't your top events, and they get a little less interested. So that a couple of issues. There's still too many partners. I mean, that's the big thing. They got to figure out how to lessen the amount of partners they have.
Here's what I like about the deal for MLB, and this is knowing that the best case scenario for MLB is that ESPN does not opt out, and they just stick with the ESPN, and they go into 2028 with all their rights up. But for MLB, and you talked about this, it's sort of the old NFL formula. Let's seed Netflix with a couple of home run derby, Field of Dreams. You didn't mention the World Baseball Classic, which Netflix got the rights to in Japan, where Shohei
Yep.
Ohtani is a superstar, and so it's seeding a potential bidder there. It's seeding NBC of saying, like, if you want to build out your sports, like, just taste us and figure out what baseball can provide to the to their network. And so I actually kind of like that. And I also don't necessarily agree. One of the biggest complaints I hear from friends who are not part of the business is that they don't know where to find the games, and that's consistent. But it's not a baseball problem. The NFL is on every single media company out there. Like, all of a sudden, a Friday night game in September was on YouTube. Who's going to find that? Who's going to find that? People end up finding it. I know that my Maryland Terrapins are playing in the basketball tournament in Las Vegas. And last night I turned on the television, I clicked on the Maryland icon, and it took me to, I think TNT had it, but I didn't have to go and really search for TNT. I think that that it's a common complaint that I hear, but it's one that I don't want to say I dismiss. I can dismiss it because I'm not in the business, but it's one that I don't think is overly valid, because it happens with basketball, with football, with every other sport that's out there.
That's because you're rich. You got the big TV show and everything, and so for
No, Rich, I'm
you,
using
adding
Hulu Plus
no,
Live
but no, because the
TV.
thing is, if you're a Yankee fan, I'll use that example. You could do it for the Red Sox. You could do it for the Pirates. If you're a Yankee fan, you got to have to watch the Yankees. Now, your show, I've used this joke on every podcast I'm on. Your show's only so long, so I won't maybe list them all. But to watch the Yankees this upcoming season, you need the Yes Network, which is their home, their Nesson of New York. You need Netflix for opening day. You need Amazon Prime Video, which has about 20 games per year regular season. You need ESPN. You need Fox. You probably need FS1, TNT Sports, Apple for 4 games, Apple TV. Yeah, I'm like losing fingers. I have no more fingers left. So that's not great. And yes, I believe you have YouTube TV, which I do think the interface people love, because you just click on it and it gives you to the icon, and you don't have to really search a channel. You're just searching for your event, and it works very well. And others do as well. I mean, I don't want to, limit it to, I have Spectrum, which I find, pretty good for the deal that I get. I think is actually they're working towards, you get all the extra apps included or whatever. I'm sure I'm paying for it in some way, but so but you can't. I'll say this. I think the best example I can use is load management. When load management came into the NBA teams were basically coaches and players were basically saying this game is not that important. We don't want this star to play because we want this person to be ready for the playoffs. You tell fans that they just get a little less inclined to watch. And I think the same can be said for when you make it difficult to watch all the games. You're telling fans, well, you know what, we're gonna make it hard for you. Fans, especially in this day and age with the internet and so many choices that you have, um, they might find other things to do. Maybe not your diehard. They got to make it easier. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, I in the Athletic, I wrote a column a few months ago. A plan of what they could do, and I think. But the biggest thing was, that again they know this. I'm not like you know. Uh, breaking down the atom here. But they got to have simplicity and they got to try to create scarcity for the so simplicity for the fans, scarcity for their partners. And so if they can do that, they have a chance. And I think they're working towards it. I think they get a really MLB gets a little bit of a raw deal because the blackouts nobody likes, but those are arcane and those are because of contracts from way back when, and you can't just break those. So it's not as if MLB doesn't know they want to get rid of blackouts and make it easier for fans that way. So I think they're going in the right direction potentially. I just think if you look at what they've done over the last decade, they've really had a lot of missteps.
Andrew, one more quick break. I want to come back. You broke a story about Netflix and sports, and Netflix actually hiring talent, which surprised me a little bit. So let's talk about that when we come back. So the fascinating thing to me about these streamers getting into sports is that Netflix is using the broadcast production talent to produce the games, and Everwonder is getting in there as well to the Jeff Zucker company to produce a lot of these games. So is YouTube. That's how Amazon started. They're really not building out production teams or production facilities. But you had an interesting story about Netflix actually going out and hiring a talent to be exclusive to Netflix. Like, take me through like what the story was and what the thinking was about that Netflix had in terms of moving forward with that.
Yeah, so Netflix has hired Elle Duncan, who Boston fans are familiar with, and now national fans have been for the last decade at ESPN. She's going to Netflix. She'll be the lead on all their uh, games and other events that they have. They have Christmas Day, which I don't know if she'll be available for this Christmas, but going forward, then they have the Women's World Cup. They have the MLB that we talked about opening day, Giants and Yankees. They don't have a full calendar yet. It shows that it probably is going to grow. They're going to add events. She might do some non-sports stuff. There was some discussion about her maybe remaining at ESPN. There were talks between her side and ESPN that I'm very, very pessimistic that's going to happen. ESPN doesn't want to start that precedent. They love Elle Duncan, but they just don't want to start that precedent. You look at the schedule, it doesn't really work out. And the idea that Netflix is coming into the game and they're trying to eat ESPN's lunch. So why would you want to, team up with them and be secondary to Netflix? I kind of can understand where ESPN's coming from, but I do think, we've seen there. We talked about it. Any conversation we've had, for a long time, John, you and I, we've talked about the Netflixes and Apples and Amazons and yada yada. This is the next stage. I mean, the fact that they're hiring people because the other thing that happens, Christmas Day last year, ESPN let them use, Netflix used a lot of their talent. This year, they said no to everybody, which I think is understandable personally. Now, if someone's not making a lot of money, they should let them do whatever they want. But if they're paying someone a lot of money for exclusivity, I don't know why you're going to help someone who's a burgeoning competitor who has trillions of dollars and can basically, it's not going to happen, I don't think, but they can put you out of business. So why do you want to make them better? And so I think this is it's a flag you put on the ground in terms of where Netflix is going as a sports entity.
Well, so that's my question. Let's take a step back. And Netflix is this is the drinking game for this podcast. Eventizing, it's into eventizing. It's two drinks. I said it twice, but it wants to it just wants to pick off certain big events that it can then promote a lot. And in a couple of weeks they have a boxing match, Jake Paul boxing match down in Miami. And the Christmas Day NFL games. It doesn't seem to have a lot of interest in a full season of games, really anywhere. What does it speak though to them actually hiring a talent to come in to be the face of the of sports? Does it mean that they want to do more, or does it mean that they just were tired of all those fights that they were having with the ESPNs and Foxes of the world who weren't letting their talent go over to Netflix?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the two. They have had the roadblocks. You look at the Christmas Day game, CBS is producing those games, so CBS talent is allowed to do it. So Ian Eagles, the play-by-player on the first game, and then the late game, you have no Eagle from NBC. I do think the NFL had to push a little bit because Amazon Prime Video now has Ian Eagle on the NBA, and those two are competitors, Amazon Prime Video and Netflix, and then NBC, again, similarly to ESPN. I think the NFL had to kind of say a little bit like, yeah, we'd like this to feel big, and those two are the broadcasters we'd want. And it does. Like, I think YouTube, the first game of the year that they had Rich Eisen on play-by-play, who's not a great play-by-player, and then Kurt Warner was the analyst. And it just felt a little bit more not as big. Kurt Warner is very good. I don't have a problem with him, but Rich Eisen I don't think is a great play-by-player, and so um, yeah, I think it shows both. They need people, so they fill out their roster. I mean, what she got a huge raise from what she was making at ESPN, from my understanding, and she's going to be doing a lot less work. Right now she's on a daily Sports Center at 6 p.m. with Kevin Nagandi, and now she won't be doing that, and there's not that many events, but they'll add stuff. She might do some non-sports. She'll be able to work at other networks. So if Nessa wants her back, they'd maybe hire her. And so, uh, but yeah, I think it shows where they're going. I don't think you make that hire with the idea that, oh, we're done. Um, and that said, though, they need to hire a lot of people. The Women's World Cup's coming up. Was that 27? Um, that's a huge thing. You to do all those games and to do it right, you got to make a lot of hires. Now soccer's a little different. People kind of borrow and people are all over the place with that stuff, but you want to have a great production and it needs to feel authentic. And so, they settled, they had some talks with Malika Andrews this summer. That was a possibility. She re-signed with ESPN. But I think Elle Duncan was the one that they really wanted, and now they got her.
So let's spin this forward, because I've thought for the longest time, how hard is it to set up your own production company? New networks come on board and they set up productions, and it works out okay. I had a story earlier this week about I mentioned Everwonder before. The Jeff Zucker company. They're very close to doing a deal where they're handling Live Golf's productions, telecasts, and the idea of a freelance production company that's out there that can do these higher end sports, live sports. Uh, does Netflix have to build out its own production, or can they use freelancers and others that are already out there? And that's the same question for Apple TV. That's the same question for YouTube as well, and all these other streamers that are out there.
Here's the thing: they can, but they better be good. And if you look at what Fox, CBS, NBC, ESPN, we can all quibble with a lot of things about their production. They're still the top of the top. And, I know that, behind the scenes, Amazon Prime Video's Thursday night coverage, it's produced by NBC. Netflix on Christmas Day, produced by CBS. So they're getting top production. It looks like it normally looks, and that's really important for fans to like your service. You don't want to come out and this feels almost like a bygone era. But when Amazon Prime Video first started, the first question, the number one thing that I wrote about and we talked about was, will it work? Which might sound crazy for $1 trillion company, but just starting up something to have that many people streaming at once was hadn't been done before. Not as simple as people think, and you have to get that stuff right. So yes, could you freelance with other companies? Yeah, but they better have really good production because that's going to reflect on you. Amazon, I think, will move towards their own production. They love to keep everything in house, so they control everything. It's hard though when you don't have a full. They're starting to have a full 365-day sports entity. So you have but you have a lot of conflicts. So you could maybe build it out. The best way to build it out is when Fox took the NFL from CBS back in the early '90s and basically ravaged CBS Sports, and you hire a lot of people from CBS Sports, and now they're Fox people. That's the best way to produce it, or to recreate it. That's not as easy though. But you're seeing it. The producer for NBA on Amazon, their lead producer was ESPN's college basketball league producer. So they'll start pulling some people in, but behind the scenes, it's complicated. And if you're only doing 5 or 6 events, you're not going to have full-time people. So yes, that could work, but they better do a good job.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned like the idea of will it work? Because we spent so much time thinking about that with Amazon when they got the NFL exclusively, and it didn't work at first. And then, not magically, they figured it out. Netflix and that Jake
What
Paul,
do you mean it didn't
Mike
work?
Tyson
What do you
fight.
mean it didn't work?
It didn't work in terms of there were too many early on. There were glitches.
Got it.
There was lag
I
time.
thought, yeah, I thought it
The
started
actual
off pretty well,
technology.
but yeah, you're right. There was a
But
little
it
bit.
went immediately, and it's now it became very quickly. It became not an issue at all. Netflix, the
Yep.
Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight, same thing. And
Yeah.
the next sports event they had, no glitches whatsoever. So it's funny that you bring that up because it seems like a relic from the past of sorts.
Well, again, after Tyson Paul, that was the big thing going to NFL Christmas games last year. Will it work? Because that was they get upset if I call it a gimmick, but Tyson Paul to me was a gimmick, and they'll call it an event. They had a lot of people, whatever. We could argue about that if it's a gimmick or not. But the NFL is not a gimmick. That's everyone's very interested in it. It had to work. It did work. And now we take it for granted that it will work. But I will say, and they could, from Netflix executives to NFL executives, they were nervous going into that game that if there's an issue with how it streams. It wasn't. They were right, and it worked out.
Andrew Marchand, always a pleasure. Thanks a ton. We'll have you back on soon.
Thanks, Ben.
In the past, it's always been, different TV networks that are negotiating against each other to get these sports rights to come on. But now you can just tell the chaos that's out there where you have streamers that are coming in, you have broadcasters, you still have cable networks that are out there. Every time I talk with Andrew, there are more questions than answers, but it's a great beat, and we both have a lot of fun covering it. So I want to thank Andrew Marchand for taking the time to join the pod today. This guy, he knows his stuff. I love having him on. More importantly, though, I want to thank you for listening to The Varsity, an Odyssey podcast in partnership with Puck. I also want to thank the executive editors from Puck. That's Gabi Grossman, Ben Landy, John Kelly, and the great team from Odyssey, Bob Tabador and Patrick Antonetti. If you like this podcast, make sure to sign up for my newsletter, also called The Varsity. Head over to puck.news and use the code word The Varsity. That's all one word for a 20% discount. And I will see you on Sunday.